This is the Dzogchen Sende Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi. This morning, let's explore the fifth of 5 verses of the, what's it called? Give me a second here. The Meditation Manual. Composed by the great Buddhist reformer Vajrasattva of the Swat Valley. Supreme wisdom is difficult to realize except by way of wisdom itself. Okay, so we see wisdom used twice, one lowercase, one uppercase. Let's see if the remainder of the passage amplifies this. Dependence on others is merely notional, since bliss actually arises naturally from within. So it is my insistence that the phrase naturally from within modifies the noun wisdom. Okay, so let's see if we can't make this a trifle more practical. And to do that, I'm going to shift to a set of visual aids. So, quick review. For about 300,000 years, human Paleolithic culture was driven by the proto-communistic ideals of being flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, kind of like groovy Qui-Gon Jinn. Sadly, after about 287,000 years, this was disrupted by the Neolithic Revolution, driven by the proto-capitalism, which turned human culture on its head, driving us to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, making us less like groovy Qui-Gon Jinn and more like grumpy Mace Windu. This is probably why Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks. These controlling, elitist, competitive people can't wait to disempower us and tell us that we can't become a Buddha without their help, that we aren't a Buddha unless they say we're a Buddha, that we're not meditating unless they describe it as meditation, that we're not a fully qualified teacher unless they think we're a fully qualified teacher. But do we really want the approval of those who rejoice in being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel? To gain their approval, would we not have to be just like them? I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like the Big Lebowski. I want to be like the dude. I want to be flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. And I suspect you do too, for that is what has led you to my digital doorstep. So no, Dorothy, no, Virginia, we don't need the blessings of a real or imagined guru or Roshi or Ajahn or Lama. Why is that? Bliss actually rises naturally from within. Each of us is already born with the neurological equipment necessary to practice mindfulness and meditation in such a way as to calm our anxiety and calm our aggression and stimulate our empathy, no less our peace and wisdom and ability to go with the flow. Let's take a deeper look at that. Going to tap this bit. Here we go. So, when we follow the truly terrible advice of the 90%, we wind up actively focusing and actively analyzing, which can so exhaust both our dorsolateral and medial prefrontal cortex that we begin presenting with symptoms of depression, no less triggering our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression, which is just darkly ironic because no one sets out on the path of meditation and says, I need to be more cranky. No, they want to be more peaceful, but they get bad advice, they follow bad advice, and they get bad results. I know I did. Probably you too. Fortunately, neither the amygdala nor the prefrontal cortex constitute the entirety of our central nervous system. Consider, if you will, the simple spinal cord, whose fancy name is the hub of our autonomic nervous system. When we cooperate with it, it calms the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala and gently stimulates the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus. So that's the overview. Now, the idea is this. Every moment we have a choice. Do we continue with the exhausting habit of actively competing against our own autonomic nervous system, or instead do we passively cooperate with our autonomic nervous system? The $64,000 question is, how do we do that? Glad you asked. We'll begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, we are wired to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord. That could be described as the hub of our sympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way. It has evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all mind's antics of perception, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. All of them, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Fools and fiends will shame us for what we feel, but the truly enlightened will remind us that merely perceiving is not villainous. Noticing what we are feeling is not wrong. Of course, that begs the question, what do we do with what we notice and what we feel so that they do not pull our puppet strings and make villains and fools of us? And here's the answer: meditation. every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have already evolved to automatically access both the tippy top and the very bottom of that same spinal cord, whose fancy name would be the hub of our parasympathetic nervous system. It is evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release during our exhalation to such a degree that that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void. When I was in 4th grade, my teacher explained to me that what's the word I'm looking for? A simile is only as effective as it is relatable. And she told me that even though I loved rocket ships, and not everything could be compared to being an astronaut or to Star Trek. So similarly, we have to ask the question, what is a real-world example that really illuminates the simile of a non-graspable vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although could look tantalizing to the eye, could feel non-graspable to the hand? And so we see that whether we're dealing with the metaphor of emptiness or no self, they're just figurative ways of describing the experience latent, hidden within each of our exhalations. So powerful is the simple act of cooperating with our inhalation and our exhalation that and that alone is all that is required for us to intuitively practice the remaining 6 folds of the Buddha's 8-fold path. The more we practice mindfulness and meditation once every 12 hours or so, the more we cannot help but notice impermanence and emptiness. The more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more we automatically practice loving kindness, intentionally, in a manner that affects our intention and communication and conduct and commerce. The more we play with mindfulness and meditation, perhaps once every 12 hours or so, the more we practice the right effort, or effortless effort, or wu wei, or go with the flow. What if enlightenment was nothing more than getting so good at this 8-fold path that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively? Because it is not something that has to be forced, because it is already our evolutionary birthright. All we have to do is stop fighting against our autonomic nervous system and allow our body to notice and relax in harmony with its breathing as it has already evolved to do. Perhaps that is why the Buddha promised in the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta that one could master this path in as little as 7 days. Now let's get a little bit more practical. Our practicality will hit 2 levels. Level 1, the rules of thumb. The most efficient way for us to practice mindfulness is for us to silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this every time we feel our chest swell with breath. Similarly, the most efficient way for us to practice meditation is for us to silently and mentally recite the verb rest every time we feel our chest subtly sink as gently we exhale. Now, the second level of practicality. What do we do when rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel people judge us cruelly and ignorantly. After all, we evolved to dread such a thing. And let's explore that for a moment. A fool would say, well, just don't care what other people think. But we have evolved to care what other people think. Why? Evolution. All the mysteries of biology can only make sense within the context of evolution. Humans have evolved. Humans do not reproduce. There's a fancy way, but we don't evolve spontaneously. We don't split in half like an amoeba. We need a mate. And because we are not the fastest of mammals or the strongest of mammals, having neither claws nor fangs, we found there was safety in numbers. And so whether we call humans a pack or a herd or a tribe, those most loved by the herd get the best eating and mating and safety opportunities. And those who are the least loved and valued by the herd get the worst eating and mating and safety opportunities. So we evolved to care deeply about what others think about us. To ignore this evolutionary impulse is folly. And yet, if we allow it to be our master, it will make us miserable and neurotic. Will it not? So what do? The answer is going to be painfully obvious, so please resist the urge to facepalm yourself at high velocity and knock yourself out. When we feel ourselves anxious or resentful or self-loathing during our in-breath, we label it. And what do we label it? This. What do we do with it? What's the antidote? When it's time for us to exhale, and it always is, we simply silently and mentally recite the verb rest. Now, this is not a magic incantation like that wonderful scene from Fellowship of the Ring, enter friend, speak friend and enter. We're not coercing or forcing our sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous systems to notice and relax. They are already trying to do that. We're just speaking to our sense, our illusion of will and volition, and instructing it the way as in junior high when we learned basic programming. We're just using that sensibility to say, okay, sense of self, what we're going to do right now is simply label whatever we're experiencing this, and then we're going to rest. Now, does that make all our neurosis evaporate instantly? No. Does that make people pull their heads out of the warm, dark place they sometimes keep their heads? No. Then why do this? Because it helps us to process the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. It helps us to cope with the folly of others and with our own folly. Think of it this way. When I was a kid, I used to read Peanuts comics. And Lucy Van Pelt described herself as a fuzzbudget. She defined herself by her ability to boss others on the playground. Contrast that with the idea of a grandfather, on a bench watching his his grandchildren playing in the sandbox. He's aware of what's going on, but he's bemused by the folly of their games. Playing, cooperating with our autonomic nervous system in a manner described as mindfulness and meditation transforms us from a Lucy Van Pelt to a bemused grandfather. It transforms us from a grumpy Mace Windu to a groovy Qui-Gon Jinn. Both, good things and bad things happen in the universe shared by Mace Windu and Qui-Gon Jinn. The difference is their reaction to them. Mace had a very rigid and controlling response. Qui-Gon had a very flexible and laid-back response. If we want to be happy, we got to be less like Mace and more like Qui-Gon. We got to be less like the Big Lebowski and more like the dude. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. For the remainder of this morning's live stream, together, let us sit and breathe and notice and rest. The most efficient way for us to gently invite our subtle energies to coalesce at our chest is for us to touch the tip of our left middle finger to the lower knuckle of our right middle finger, palms up in our lap. Let's see if I can somehow adjust that. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 10 minutes or so. The more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more we will experience, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds will flow from love's deeply centered spontaneity. That is the most efficient way for us to utilize all the organelles of our central nervous system. It is also the most efficient way for us to respond to imperialists and fascists and protect our neighbors using whatever skills we have. Sometimes we can define ourselves by our emotions, which makes perfect sense if it wasn't for the fact that no emotion lasts forever. Emotions come and go. We live in a universe where impermanence is not an object of faith. It's something we observe. We see the coming and going of the seasons, the waxing and waning of the moon, the rising and the setting of the sun, the swelling and the sinking of our chest. Motions come and go. To define ourselves by something that comes and goes is going to create more anxiety than it heals. It's also going to limit our possibilities and our opportunities for growth and evolution. But by noticing and relaxing into whatever we feel, however intense or subtle or long-lasting or brief it may be, launches us off the precipice of ignorance into the free fall of meditation. This is what transforms life into an exciting adventure where whatever comes up fuels our evolution and our love and our wisdom and our service to others. The great, I think it was Bengali poet Tagore offered a simple 3-line poem. I dreamt that life was bliss. I woke and saw that life was service. I acted and found that service was bliss. In approximately 11 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tonight's recitation, explanation, and then practice of meditate like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.